Femininity by Susan Brownmiller. Chapter 8, Ambition. If prettiness and grace were the extent of it, femininity would not be a puzzle, nor would excellence in feminine values be so completely at odds with other forms of ambition. In a sense, this entire inquiry has been haunted by the question of ambition, for every adjustment a woman makes to prove her feminine difference adds another fine stitch to the pattern. An inhibition on speech and behavior, a usurpation of time, and a preoccupation with appearance that deflects the mind and depletes the storehouse of energy and purpose. If time and energy are not a problem, if purpose is not a concern, if the underlying submissiveness is not examined too closely, then the feminine ethics may not be a handicap at all. On the contrary, high among its own satisfactions, femininity offers a welcome retreat from the demands of ambition, just as its strategic use is often good camouflage for those wishing to hide their ambitions from public view. But there is no getting around the fact that ambition is not a feminine trait. More strongly expressed, a lack of ambition, or a professed lack of ambition, or a sacrificial willingness to set personal ambition aside, is virtuous proof of the nutrient feminine nature, which, if absent, strikes at the guilty heart of femaleness itself. When applied to women, nurturance embraces a love of children, a desire to bear them and rear them, and a disposition that leans toward a set of traits that are not gender specific: warmth, tenderness, compassion, sustained emotional involvement in the welfare of others, and a weak or non existent competitive drive. Nurturant labor includes childcare, spouse care, cooking and feeding, soothing and patching, straightening out disorder, and cleaning up dirt. Little considerations like sewing on a button on a grown man's raincoat. Major considerations like nursing relationships and mending rifts. Putting the demands of family and others before one's own, and dropping one's work to minister to the sick, the troubled, and the lonely in their times of need. When nurturance is given out of love, disposition, or a sense of responsible duty, the assumption exists that whatever form it takes, changing a diaper or baking a tray of raisin nut cookies, the behavior expresses a woman's biological nature. When nurturing acts are performed by men, they are interpreted as extraordinary or possibly suspect. When nurturance is provided by maids, housekeepers, kindergarten teachers, or practical nurses, its value is in the marketplace is low. Are women the nurturing sex by anatomical design? In the original sense of nurture, what the body can do to support new life, of course, the answer is yes. Femaleness in humans and other mammals is defined by the manner of reproduction, gestation and nourishment inside the womb, followed by nursing the dependent young upon birth. Few would deny that the nurturant responsibilities of motherhood begin as a biological process, and that suckling connects the labor of birth to the social obligation of continuing care, or so the rhythms of nature undisturbed by human civilization suggest. In the depths of the forest, or on the grassy plains of the savanna, wherever groupings of mammals exist in the wild, milk is the crucial lifeline from mother to infant. Cleaning, carrying, and protecting from danger are closely related acts, although the indifferent mother is not unknown. Active maternal nurturance is the stable core of the social order for animals that live in groups, marked by strong bonds of kinship and positions of high rank and power, for some, that frequently pass to the next generation. Behavior that appears more pronounced in the male of the same species, fighting, displays of dominance, defense against predators, grabbing the best and largest portion, does not compare in social cohesion to the bond of maternal relation. In hunting and gathering bands, the earliest form of human society that was once universal, the dual purpose of woman was central to a group survival. responsible for bearing and rearing the next generation, as well as for collecting and preparing the basic foods for everyday needs. Women, the mother and the gatherer, watch the productive labor and communal importance, at least, of man the hunter, as she does today in the Kalahari Desert, where remnant foraging groups, the Kunsan, continue their traditional ways. It was no fault of women or men, or even of their ambitious yearnings, that as civilization advanced, the unchanging nature of biologically determined work became increasingly tangential to societal progress. To gain dominion over nature and bend it to human will, the restless intelligence of the Homo sapien brain required a carefree reproductive system and physical strength attributes that were characteristically male. With the cultivation of land and permanent towns, with the unleashing of competitive drives and personal ambitions that led to the accumulation of property and the rise of stratified classes, the necessary tasks of reproduction and nurture were no longer at the vital center of human endeavor. Inexorably and conclusively, the logic of femaleness, with its inherent capacity for two kinds of purposeful labor, reproductive and quote unquote other, became a less powerful force in the social order than the single minded capabilities of males. Examining the social contribution of women's work in four pre industrial economies foraging, slash and burn, horticulture, animal herding, and intensive farming. The anthropologist Sharon Tiffany suggests that the perception of motherhood as women's sole valuable function goes hand in hand with severe prohibitions on the other opportunities for work and with a devaluation of womanhood in general in economic systems where men unquestionably dominate the means of production and the balance of power. When motherhood, child tending, and housekeeping chores became a socioeconomic and cultural ideal that excludes the performance of income producing work, female sexuality in turn becomes a male concern that reflects male interests. The right to free sexual expression, the right to control fertility and to choose whether or not to be a mother, and the right to value a girl child and her promise as much as a boy and his, are determined by considerations that are male defined. Thousands of years ago, in the pantheistic religions of the Eastern and Western worlds, worship of the mother goddess, Astarte, Isis, and others, was a reverent acknowledgement of the life giving powers of women and nature. Reflective of patriarchal domination over women and land, monotheistic belief turned away from the concept of primordial birth and superimposed the divine will of a male deity on the act of procreation. Motherhood plays no part in the Genesis myth of creation. Adam is not born of a woman, he is fashioned directly by the hand of God. Eve, his helpmate, is fashioned in turn from man's proverbial rib. With this unusual reordering of biological birth, the submission of women to man was given a firm theological basis. The historic terms under which motherhood was sanctioned, only in marriage to ensure inherited wealth, further eroded maternal power and placed upon pregnancy elements of coercion, punishment, and shame. As Christianity spread and suppressed the pagan religions, gestation in the womb was reduced to a caretaker function, and the pain and peril of childbirth, ironically, a consequence of the large human head and its capacity for knowledge, came to be seen as the wages of original sin. As the means of survival shifted perceptibly from agricultural systems to industrial economies, the traditional scope of women's work suffered new forms of attrition. The hearth, the broom, the spinning wheel, and the cradle had been honored symbols of the female share in the household partnership of productive family labor, but the home itself as a central place of work was diminished in importance when spinning and weaving, among other skills, were gradually supplanted by mass production. Developing technology, mechanized power, specialization of labor, and a system of wages increased the mobility and status of men in the economy at large, but the isolated performance of women's domestic work remained quote unquote free, except when performed by servants. Even milk from the breast suffered a drastic loss in status when a wet nurse of the peasant class, or milk from a cow or a goat, and later a powdered formula, were found to suffice, and moreover, to improve the chance for an infant survival when maternal breastfeeding was unavailable, insufficient, or discouraged by social custom. While the power of law and religion combined to prohibit a woman from seeking out income producing work that was stamped as male, an appeal to her feminine nature was duly employed to assuage her ambitions and keep her content. In a poignant example of feminine sentiment used as a wedge against female ambition, childbirth itself was placed under male supervision when the skills of midwifery were surpassed by medical study, from which women were barred as unfit by their delicate nature. Armed with the newest antiseptic and surgical knowledge, a doctor in the 19th century did have more to offer than a midwife's limited to traditional skills. A sorry fact that did much to destroy a historic bond of sisterhood at the urgent moment of a new life. Yet a woman doctor, or a woman who wished to become a doctor, was typically caricatured as unwholesomely mannish or likely to faint at the sight of blood, fated to fail one way or another in her foolish attempt to transgress the limits of her sex. Only the soft, unchallenging aspects of human behavior remained in the female province: a sweet disposition, the habits of neatness, a gentle desire to care for others. And these were enshrined as the superior values of unspoiled femininity as a moral ideal: the dutiful daughter, the good little wife, and the virtuous mother who were grateful to live within the protected enclosure of their shrinking domestic sphere. Refinement of one's feminine nature by staying at home in love and devotion was not meant for women of the working poor, who labored side by side with their men on the land, or those who came to the city with their families to put in 12-hour days at the mills. Neither did women of the of the upper levels of society need instruction in the feminine impropriety of labor. Born to a fashionable life of aesthetic indulgence and a continual round of social engagement, they showed the usual eagerness of their privileged station to hand over all practical work, including the rearing of children, to the care of servants. It took the scrambling ambitions of a powerful new middle class, hard-working, ingenious, acquisitive, and insecure, to impose the ideal of the aristocratic leisure lady on women of its own kind as a hallmark of upward direction. It took a bourgeois value system propelled by industrious struggle and material gain to pridefully create a woman of total economic dependency in a home in which she now ranked as an ornamental possession, and to see her as a reward of free enterprise, a tribute to the virile success of men. Marxist theoreticians of the 19th century might analyze reproduction as the means by which the exploited masses provided their oppressors with cannon fodder and factory hands. But they could find no place within their strict definitions of work and class for motherhood and nurturance as genuine forms of productive labor. Viewing the new rich in a kinder light, social Darwinians attempting to explain the human struggle, developed the concept of survival of the fittest as an exclusive matter of male against male competition. In the first half of the 20th century, it fell to the Freudians to puzzle over the unhappiness of middle class women with their suppressed ambitions and to offer the solution of marriage and motherhood as full time work. The goal of a healthy, mature, and adjusted woman was to rid herself of mannish, competitive desires, as she was to transcend her immature, mannish clitoral pleasure. Complete fulfillment and sexual satisfaction could reside only in her vagina, her uterus, and her feminine role. 2 centuries before the Christian era, the moral goodness of motherhood was extolled by the Romans in the story of the widow Cornelia, mother of the noble Gracchi, who sacrificed the chance of remarriage and wealth to devote her life to raising her sons, whom she proudly called her jewels. Cornelia's example was soon surpassed, however, by another mother whose impact on the feminine ideal has been felt for nearly 2,000 years. Created by the Catholic Church on a few scant references in the Gospels, not always favorable at that, the story of Mary, mother of Jesus, is a moral exhortation to the high purpose of motherhood as the pinnacle of feminine ambition that excludes the reality of sex. As Marina Werner reminds us in her brilliant treatise, Alone of All Her Sex, the Virgin is not tainted by worldly desires. She never gets angry or seeks to impose her will. She prayerfully intercedes with the difficult Father, but she does not interfere with his commands or wishes, nor with the commandments or wishes of his Son. The Madonna's perfection resides in her simplicity, her chastity, her gentle devotion, her merciful compassion, her modest humility, and her dutiful submission, and her luck is having been chosen as the holy womb and comforting breast for the Son of God. For these humble qualities she is ultimately rewarded as a queen in heaven. Alone among women, she has pleased the Lord. The suckling goddess was an important fixture in religious iconography as far back as discovered civilization. In Roman legend, the Milky Way was created when Juno, who was nursing Hercules, squirted her milk across the night sky. Warner records that one female biological function permitted the Virgin in Christian faith was the act of nursing, yet by the 16th century contemporary prudishness and the upper-class custom of employing a wet nurse led to the virtual disappearance from art of the suckling Madonna. Collected and told by the Brothers Grimm, German folklore in the 18th century put forward another vision of motherhood that was also a moral lesson. In Hansel and Gretel, Cinderella, and The Tale of Snow White, the story turns on a mother who is not really a mother at all. She is instead an uncaring stepmother, a stock figure of selfishness, overweening pride, and personal ambition. Unmindful of her nurturant duties or actively plotting to get rid of her children, her husband is either too busy, too weak, or too blinded by love to notice. The wicked stepmother is a cautionary example of maternal negligence and rejection who always gets her comeuppance in the end. By the mid-20th century, another negative parable of motherhood has assumed the proportions of popular myth. Stereotyped in modern American folklore as the nagging Jewish mother, although hardly restricted to one ethnic type, she was a melodramatic matriarch past her childbearing years who could not accept that her job was over and done. A caricature of overbearing nurture, this mother belittled and bossed her husband, scrubbed the floor on her hands and knees when the maid had finished, overcooked the food in her efforts to provide a nourishing meal, and made her son feel guilty for not calling home. In psychoanalytic thinking, the quote unquote domineering or quote unquote suffocating or quote unquote overprotective mother was held responsible for humankind's problems, homosexuality and criminal behavior, including rape, among them, as much of the quote unquote rejecting mother who refused to accept her feminine role. The point is this: while the sentiments of motherhood are designed to collect the ambitions a woman might hold in her heart and direct them toward the goal of nurture, even the nurturing woman can be too ambitious and powerful for the public good. Aggressive nurturance looms as yet another unfeminine fault, or perhaps as a contradiction in terms. Although managerial direction of the career of a husband or child has produced some important reputations in art, music, and literature, the stage mother who encourages her offspring's talent and the professional widow who works tirelessly to keep her husband's work in the public eye are still perceived as unpleasantly pushy. When it comes to her own success, it has never been becoming for a woman to try hard. Sweat under the arms, a clenched jaw, an unladylike grunt. These are, after all, the unavoidable signs of straining effort. A man may keep his nose to the grindstone, but a woman had better stop now and again to powder hers. Appearance, we are told, is more feminine than result. Unremarkably, a tiny handful of ambitious careers with certified feminine allure remain glamorous, big dreams with slim chance for realization. Actress, singer, model, interviewer on television, in which looking attractive is a part of the performance, so the desire to be noticed can be partly excused. But not totally excused. Not long ago, a lady was someone whose name appeared in the papers only at birth, marriage, and death, and a castrating bitch was a woman whose competence equaled a man's. Despite the celebrity mania of the last few decades, unreserved approval of an outstanding woman is still debatable in the public mind, and when asked, she is expected to profess as an article of faith that her husband and children come first, or would come first were she lucky enough to have them. Talent, ability, and intellectual promise integrate uneasily with a feminine ideal romantically connected to the superior accomplishments of husband or lover. A lust of power, status, money, or immortal fame stands outside the framework of womanly values on the grounds of brashy modesty and self indulgence, if not high romance. Metaphoric reminders of the feminine ideal are doubly instructive when they cast the ambitions of a woman in a monstrous light. Think of the glamorous facade on a chilling Faye Dunaway in Network, the sugary frosting on a poisonous Anne Baxter in All About Eve, as a frightening image of femininity abandoned. The ugly witch, with her crooked nose and hairy chin, is all the more satanic when she rides her broomstick at midnight, subverting the trusty symbol of loyal housewifery, the moral goodness of sweeping clean to nefarious ends. In A Tale of Two Cities, Madame Defarge makes sinister use of a nurturant task, her knitting, to implement her vengeance. Childless and driven, she embodies the terrifying excess of the French Revolution. Lady Macbeth and Hedda Gabler, possibly the two most ambitious and destructive females in theatrical history, are childless women. A third, Medea, destroys her children in an act of revenge. Well into the 60s, before the new feminist movement, it was conventional in books, movies, plays, and psychoanalytic writing to ascribe success, achievement, and especially destruction in women to motherhood denied and nurturance thwarted. By contrast, as we are forever reminded, the ambitions of men, their manly striving and competitive struggles, find inspiring metaphors in the acts of erection, copulation, ejaculation, in seminal fluid itself, and in a fairy tale picture of the physiology of conception in which eager, aggressive, adventurous sperm are imagined to elbow each other out of the way in their dash to reach an impassive egg. As it happens, the swimming motions of sperm are random, not directed. They are actively transported upward through the female tract by estrogen induced secretions, cervical filaments, and muscular contractions along the passage. Sperm, of usual size and shape, are shunted aside, destroyed, and discarded. Scientific information, however, is slow to catch up with popular myth, particularly when it contradicts a cherished bias. Motherhood and ambition have been seen as opposing forces for thousands of years, largely because of the new feminist movement. The internalized conflict, as well as the external reality, recently have become a subject of renewed attention. For many women, perhaps most, motherhood versus personal inhibition represents the heart of the feminine dilemma. In the work of psychologist Carol Gilligan, ambivalence in making and sticking to some hard decisions, abortion, career choice, long considered a feminine weakness, has been shown to stem from the ethics and responsibilities of motherhood, the importance of quote unquote caring relationships, as women perceive their role. But if ambition and motherhood have been in conflict, femininity and motherhood have not had a happy conjunction either. The swollen belly, edema in the legs and feet, the heaving flood tied to birth, the breast of a lactating organ, as a lactating organ, and the fatiguing chores of childcare are not glamorous, sexy, delicate, romantic, refined, or passive, as these words are usually defined. That the desire to be a mother can be a powerful ambition, too, especially when the opportunity is slow in coming. Responsive to the ticking of the biological clock, the motivation to produce and raise a child of one's own, for whatever reason, and the reasons are legion, and the gratifications that a child may bring are spurred by an urgency that is as unique to femaleness as motherhood itself. On the other hand, motherhood is so universally perceived as the ultimate proof of the feminine nature and the intended purpose of female existence that few women have the courage to admit that they do not have the gift for it, or, given a choice, that they would rather marshal their energies, their sensitivities, and their gratifications in other directions. Duality of purpose is built into female biology in ways that are hard to resist, and without the freedom of contraceptive choice in ways that are hard to avoid. The single mindedness with which a man may pursue his non reproductive goals is foreign not only to the female procreation ability, it is alien to the feminine values and emotional traits that women are expected to show. The human sentiments of motherhood, goodness, self sacrifice, and a specialty in taking care of the wants of others are without question desirable characteristics for the raising of children. But I would argue strenuously that women do not possess these traits to a greater degree by biological tendency than men. Without a radical restructuring of the social order that works well enough in its present form for these extremely ambitious competitive men whose prototypical ancestors arranged it, and who have little objective reason just yet to change the rules, what hope is there for a real accommodation of dual purpose ambition? The corporate hierarchy has no compelling motivation to modify what it demands of its career employees, and the prize at the top of the heap go to those who pursue them with single-minded devotion. Pursuit of achievement in literature, science, and the arts is a single-minded ambition that will never be restructured, for the competition, understandably, is fierce. Whatever form it takes, satisfying work that earns a decent income is always in short supply, and men are right when they say that the required expenditure of time and effort leaves little room for life's other rewards. Yet a man, if he wishes, may acquire a woman or a succession of women to provide him with the rewards of emotional support, practical nurturance, and a home and a family. A woman responding to the same needs and desires must split in two and become the traditional reward herself, at least that part, which is firmly rooted in biological fact. Is it unfair for a woman to expect that her desire to be a full time mother should be accommodated for an unspecified number of years? Should another woman avoid motherhood entirely in order to secure the full chance that any man might have for economic autonomy and satisfying work? Does a society that understands the need for successive generations have a moral obligation to ease the way for a third woman intent on fulfilling both aspects of her dual purpose ambition? Should one set of expectations be viewed as a predictable retreat into a feminine tradition of dependence, another as a singular expression of unfeminine aspirations, and the third as an admirable solution possible only for the extremely ambitious, extremely energetic few, or for those who are lucky to live with more mildly ambitious, nurturing partners? There are no easy answers to these questions.